I'm Spelman Evans Downer. I'm going to be talking about my Alaska paintings. I'm going to start with some old work and then describe the progressions of the different series that I've done since I moved to Alaska, which was way back in 1984. I've been here for 30 years at this point. I'm going to start with a really old watercolor. This is from 1979, done before I came to Alaska. I was living in New Mexico at that time. Did a lot of watercolors with pen and ink and things like that. Subsequently moved to San Francisco, and then in 1983 first came to Alaska. Really enjoyed what I saw. Decided to move to Anchorage, Alaska in 1984. Next painting I'm going to show you was one of the very first that I did in Alaska. This is a piece very abstracted called Faults Surround Anchorage. And I've always been interested in geology and fault zones. It's one of the themes you'll be hearing me speak about today. Always an inspiration. So I studied the faults around Anchorage, and I did a whole series of these early watercolors. I hadn't seen these for years. These were stored away a very, very long time ago. They're out. They're back in the gallery. I'll be showing them this year at Gallery Turquoise. Just to kind of give people a background on the way I've been working in Alaska. This is a piece from the 80s called Aerial Anchorage 89 in ink. Unfortunately, the glass broke, but we're going to go with the Marcel Duchamp, for fortuitous cracking. It's a fault zone coming up the inlet. Always been interested in drawing. Continue to use drawing as a basis for almost all of my work. Speaking of the geology, this is another early piece, actually mid-90s it says, 1995, using actual geologic maps. And this is a projected image. As you may know, I studied photorealism at San Francisco State. I worked with Robert Bechtel, a first-generation photorealist who was very good at giving you all the things you need to know about using photography for painting and drawing, projecting slides, drawing those slides onto canvas, or in my case, mostly panels, getting that accuracy of information. The main difference that I do with photorealism is I don't paint super tight, super realistically. I really am much more interested in expressionistic paint strokes. Next piece is Tourniquet Arm, 1988, number 2. This is continuing the Anchorage series. If you look, you probably see some similarity, at least in composition, to the faults around Anchorage, but now I'm using the satellite color, something I've done for a long, long time. Infrared color. You can probably see more of the expressionistic handling of this kind of work. These are small pieces that I've pulled out of the archives for the show this summer. It's going to be July 27th, 2013. This is that same YK Delta, Kuskokwim Delta. And a pretty good example of, again, very early work. This one's 1987. This one I'm using textured oil paint and spray paint. I did a lot of work with spray paint when I was younger. And this is a spray painted ocean background, plus I come in and I dust it, usually directionally. This one, it's dusted from below with blue paint, and it really brings up the relief. Makes it look a lot like a satellite image. Kind of having fun with these old ones. I don't paint like this anymore. This is 87 as well. It happens to be the Copper River Delta, and the Copper River comes through the mountains and flows out to the ocean. I've had a long-standing love affair with the Copper River, going out there when I first moved to Alaska and fishing for copper kings and copper reds. So this probably was based on one of the first trips I ever did. Subsequently, I've done, I think it's about 25 years of paintings of different sections of the Copper River. Speaking of rivers, which really makes me want to emphasize my Alaska work, aside from geography and geology, a passion for sport fishing. I was a fishing guide for 10 years for the entire 1990s with Alaska Wildland Adventures. That was when I moved here to Cooper Landing. And along the way, I've made fishing a subset of the themes that I use in my paintings. This happens to be Swanson River, and based on a canoe trip I did years ago, coming down the Swanson and into Cook Inlet. You can probably see the very expressionistic paint handling, very thick textures, but again, projected from a map. It's pretty accurate in terms of the way the river meanders across the Kenai lowlands. Also, on the early work, this is Augustine erupts, 1986, when we had the big ash eruption from Mount Augustine across from Homer, a little bit lower than Homer on Cook Inlet. It was a big event. I remember being in the ash fall. I had never experienced anything like that. So kind of fun to see this also being pulled out of the archives. And a piece of the Little Diomedes Island, the Alaska meets Siberia series. I have very few of these left. It was one of my most successful series in the late 80s. A piece was selected by the state of Alaska and taken to Providenia as a state gift. Most of those works have been sold. I was glad to find this one again. I think I have one other medium-sized one left at this point. Okay, now we're over on the, what is it? This is the east wall in the main gallery, and it shows you a wide selection of the work that are being shown for 2013. A lot of Anchorage work. I've got some old ones. I showed you this one a little while ago. This is 89. I lived in Anchorage for, I think it was 5 or 6 years. Then I moved to Cooper Landing. So right at the end of my stay, I was doing large pieces of Anchorage. Quite a few of those are out in the world. I do have some public commissions. There's one in downtown Anchorage, 4th and D Street, on the side of Cyrnell's Cafe. We've got new ones, however. This is a new one, really back to my classic style, projecting maps, using some infrared color schemes. I had a commission for a large piece that was done last summer, so that got me fired up to do a bunch of new ones. So we've got that, and some old ones. Here's a piece down the mouth of the Kenai River that was pulled out of the archives. Here's quite an unusual one from Seward, Alaska, 4th of July in Seward, Alaska, with Harding Icefield and the Blues on Tap Band. Wow, 1988. I think, was it 89, I did my Kenai Peninsula portrait. I had a show down at the Pratt Museum in Homer, Alaska. I believe this would have been from that time period. Continuing with the Anchorage theme, this is the study for a very large piece that I did as a commission for Dr. John Halligan last summer. So this one is 6 panels, adjustable panels. 2 feet by 3 feet. Shows all of Anchorage and of course the Chugach Range and Turnagain and across from Knik Arm. So that's on display. And then we also have one of the Upper Kenai River pieces. This is from a couple years ago. Yeah, back to my technique a little bit. People often ask, usually I'm using straight up oil paint and I draw into it. And it takes years, of course, for the oil paint to really become hardened. I do occasionally mix that up with modeling paste underneath. So this is modeling paste, which is an acrylic product, which dries relatively quickly, especially if I need to ship it somewhere or it has to be moved quickly. So this is modeling paste with some enamel on top. Speaking of enamel, I'm going to talk next about my pouring technique. So let's go take a look at that. I'm going to end this little presentation with talking about my poured work. Back in 1995, I went to Vermont to the Johnson Atelier. It was a month where you could experiment and just try new things. And I'd always really admired the enamel paintings that I was seeing in New York at the time, especially works by Jackson Pollock, of course, Wilhelm de Kooning, other artists that either poured or used thin enamel. thought, well, that's about time for me to try that. So I started in, I've been doing them for close to 20 years, not quite, I guess it's 18 at this point. And along the way, I've been able to develop my own vocabulary on that, where I'll pour, but it's still a representation of a location and an experience. They're not completely non-representational the way some poured works often are. This is a depiction of the currents that are meeting, of the Copper River coming into the Chitna River right below Chitna and creating this giant eddy. It was really spectacular. I witnessed this last summer on a fishing trip. So most of the poured pieces are rivers, they're currents, they're eddies, they're fishing holes. I use industrial gloss enamel. I pour, I drip, I brush, but I'm really trying to depict an image of the water. Let me show you another one. Here's one from a few years back. In this case, memories. It's another big difference between the more photorealistic based work. If I'm projecting an image, then I have a source image. I have a map, I have a satellite shot, I have an aerial photograph. I can refer to that. I have the reference image. These works, I'm really working from memory, being in a fishing hole, watching that current, seeing the eddy. I don't really use photography at that point. I come home with the image, work it in my mind, get it onto the panel, and go from there. This piece was from a plane flight up to Alaska, and I come up every year from California. I fly along the coast, and this is looking down along southeast Alaska, an area that was at one time called Ecotopia. It's just an area full of islands and inlets and water courses. Very exciting to see that from the air. So I'm just remembering what that looks like and then trying to depict it in paint. Here, I really wanted to have a lot of detail and have coves and spits and the kinds of phenomena that you would see in nature. But I don't try and paint it directly. I let the paint be a phenomena. One of my heroes, besides de Kooning and Pollock, is Paul Jenkins. In fact, I did my master's art history thesis on his work. He was a master of the poured painting. He had canvases that he would tilt, and he would let them pour in various directions to create what he called a phenomena. So I really like that idea of letting nature and the material itself make the image. So this is poured in such a way and in such an order that I get the paint to make all the detail. And it's a very Zen-like procedure. You really have to be in the moment, and you can't overwork it. And you let the phenomena of the paint material make the image. I've got one more I want to show you. This is the last painting I'm going to show for this presentation. This is also coming out of the archives that got wrapped up a few years ago. It's from a show that I had up at Fairbanks back in 2005, based on going up to the Minto Flats. It's a big wet area along the Tanana. It's west of Fairbanks. Went up there, looked around. Again, just loved the watery, wet world, and decided I could paint that, again, using the phenomena of the poured painting. So I lay out the landscape, or in this case, kind of the geology, the black and white, the striations. They're supposed to be rock formations in the geologic world. And then I get my blue paint, and in this case, I'm ladling it. Some people pour, and you can brush, and you can drip. I realized the ladle with a big, deep cup, you could reach in, grab a big pool of paint, and then starts to pool it out, and it would make lakes. So along the way, the many years of experimentation, I have a series, Minto Flats, Minto Lakes is one of them, Nancy Lakes is another one. In fact, hold there, and I'm going to grab this one other one, just for this one right over here. Just got back from Nancy Lakes, so good friend has a house up there. Was just up recently visiting, and it's not an exact depiction of Nancy Lakes, but it's a pretty good depiction of the kind of phenomena that you might see in nature if you were to pour these abstractions with industrial gloss enamel. So I'm going to leave it at that. If you can, come on down to the gallery. It's kind of a one weekend only event. July 27th, Saturday. Sunday, the gallery will be open, but we'll probably go fishing. If you do want to come down and you can't make that date, I certainly understand. Give me a call, send me an email. I can make arrangements to show you around the gallery. I'll be here till August 8th, and then it's back to California. And I'll be back next year. Just love being in Alaska. It's a real inspirational place, just full of experiences that feed the visual art that I love to make here. So thanks for watching. Come to the gallery. We'll see you here. Got it.